Today, I have the beautiful Lorna Gale on the Awakened Feminine podcast, who's joining me all the way from British Columbia in Canada. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kaki. It's wonderful to be here.
I'm really excited for our conversation. We're free flowing today, and that always takes us to beautiful places that we don't know where we're going. So it's always fun. But before we get started, Lorna, can you share with our audience just briefly who you are and what you do?
I'm happy to. Thank you. So Lorna Gale is my name, and the work that I have been, that feels like a calling from within, is that which is really supporting women, the masculine, the feminine, all to really come into this arising to not only the unity within us, around us, and also into our divinity. And the way that I do that is through my work in the sexual realm, really using the sexuality as a portal into our wholeness, both in the human realm as well as divine beings in this human experience. And I do it with a variety of modalities. I come from a background of education, so I love teaching, and even more than that, I love to really be able to support people into finding their own truth, really come into that place of themselves. So energy work and coaching and just lots of things that I do, somatic sex education, the embodiment piece of things, the empowerment. So there's a variety of things that I really use according to what each person needs in each situation. But the overall arching thing is really looking at sexual freedom and spiritual wholeness.
I love that. I was just so excited to dive into this with you. I haven't had any guests like that, talk about this, like the sexuality piece, but actually really helping people connect with the divine at the same time using that piece. So yeah, I'm just really interested in your work. But before we dive into your journey and everything that you do, I'd love to ask you this question, and that's, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
Interesting. We often think of feminine equals woman. And for me, it's coming to this aspect of recognizing that while we can look at it as the feminine aspect of someone, which often manifests in our dichotomy, in our dual world, right? There's this woman form. For me, then it really, I think there's multiple levels, Kaki, in terms of, there's the aspect of the awakened feminine in terms of recognizing who I am, we are, who identify as woman, that feminine power, that feminine energy, that sexuality that is just so rich and ripe, and as we know, has often been very, very shadowed, very hidden. And so for me, the awakened feminine really comes into that aspect of individually, where we recognize the truth of who we are as women, being in our power, and the collective that awakening recognition of that as well. And another level that I have come to experience of it as well, that is included in my teachings and my work, is that of looking at the feminine as equal to spirit, if you will. So we've got spirit and we've got form. And so looking at that aspect of the awakened feminine is the recognition of that we are, that spirit is what is flowing and form is what is in support of the spirit. So just like we've got the masculine in support of the feminine in our human experience, that it's also that recognition of our divinity and that spirit that is flowing and orchestrating and making the music through these instruments of these forms that we are in.
That's such a beautiful definition, and I was getting full body tingles just listening to you talk about it. Yeah, I haven't had anyone talk about the feminine being spirit. So, wow, that just puts a whole different, another perspective onto the awakened feminine. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Now, Lorna, I would love to. I feel like we need to talk about your journey first before we even dive into like the work that you do. And I probably think this is a really broad and large question, but how did you get into this work that you do, combining like, sexuality and divinity? Because people don't usually think of those two things. I mean, yes, I guess they're like, now that I've done my work, like I understand how that would work. But I think in mainstream, people are like, what do you mean? Like, sex is that way and divine is this way. So, can you please, just share with us that journey that took you to go, that's, how I'm going to help people, um,
Mm.
yeah, experience this. Yeah.
Okay, first, thank you. Uh, I would say that a big part of it, like a lot of us, we don't realize we're in the journey until we get to this. Sometimes that dark night of the soul, right? It's kind of like we start to look at things from a different perspective. I was raised in a conservative, a beautiful, loving family, in a beautifully supportive community, in a conservative religious community and upbringing. And I didn't realize until decades later how much that aspect of save yourself for marriage, which we were taught, how much that deeply impacted me. And as I've talked to so many people, it's kind of like, yeah, that's that piece that's been so central. It seemed that looking back on it now, I see how that really played into my storyline. And I've been since childhood an avid reader, so stories have always been there. And I think culturally, right, stories is a big thing, oral storytelling, and we pass on our cultures and our way of being through stories. So as an active story reader myself, and then into when I was teaching in the school system, I was the writing and the specialist there for teaching my students how to write stories. And then getting into entrepreneurship, we have this whole idea of, our stories, help what connect. And so when I look back on where is my story? How did I come to this place? That aspect of save yourself for marriage really impacted me, because what it showed me at some point was that my body, my sexuality were not mine. It was, if I was to save it for marriage, that meant it belonged to my marriage. It belonged to the man, my husband. And so, be a good girl, save yourself for marriage, do this, don't do that. So this whole aspect of who I was married for 30 years to an amazingly wonderful, beautiful man. And in that time, when we got married, I didn't realize that how disconnected I was from my sexuality. I could have sex. We had two beautiful daughters together. But the aspect of being connected to my sexuality really started to become aware or apparent. 5 years into our marriage, he said, "Why don't you find out what makes you feel good so you can tell me?" Because his, endeavors to help me and to please me, like men so want to do, I just didn't know. And it took me 20 years till I actually began that journey of starting to explore what made me feel good. I just got into the mode of, caring for my children, caring for my husband, and then teaching school. When my girls were out of school, I just became aware of it's time for me to really find out, connect to the sexuality. Been starting to really come into my awareness more and more. My spiritual journey, on the other hand, had been starting to take form. When I went to my teaching degree, sociology, like, wait a minute, this sounds like my religion, and those kinds of things. So some awakening started to happen that way. I would say that one of the things that was key is that one of my last years of teaching in the school system, my body, I had the gift of a health crisis. My body shut me down, first of all, with laryngitis, and then what was diagnosed at the time was fibromyalgia, a label I chose not to stay with, but to use it to vault me into my awakening. It was really looking at how I responded to a comment made by somebody at a health fair I went to at that time. And she said, "We are not humans having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." And it was really, I remember I was just shocked. Like, what do you mean? Everything that I'd been taught, this quest to connect to God, and we're here and we have to be worthy of, and all of those things. It just totally, what do you mean? And that was, as often happens, there's these job situation, traumatic things that sometimes jolt us into a totally different way of how to experience ourselves. So my spiritual journey started to happen that way, and recognizing the oneness of the divinity there, and experiencing things. And then, so as that was so beautifully taking shape, these old senses, old stories had taken on, and what we've been taught is God is everywhere. But if God is everywhere, that means everywhere, and just selectively, and we still have to try to reach that. It's literally everywhere. So whether we call it God, source, whatever it is. And then, so that just sort of continued, but went more subtly when my sexual journey now started to be there. And as I started to explore different courses and training and find out, I was able to acknowledge that, wow, I am a sexual erotic being in and of myself. I was able to start connect to my body. And in the process, I learned about sexological body work. And in that program, the first assignment is to for at least 7 days, but set aside 30 minutes per day, doing some type of their meditations that they had provided for us and options. I chose the mirror meditation. Mirrors has always played a really important role for me in terms of the reflections, looking at how things are so clearly reflected and what's real and what's not. And in that time, I remember I chose the mirror meditation. So I stripped down and I sat down on the floor, propped myself up against my bed with this mirror in front of me, full-length mirror. And as I sat there, it was just all of a sudden like, oh, gross, this is disgusting. And the shame and this disgust and self-loathing started to come up, and shame. And it was just, I just stayed with it. I stayed with it. And the tears were running down my face. And I stayed with it. And it even brought up that level of existential shame, the shame that I even existed. And so it was amazing to see those different layers of, I'll call the layers of separation from the truth of who we are, how they had been stacked up and played up. There they were all coming up. And when I got down to that depth, all of a sudden it was like the lights went on, and it was like, wow, this is so amazing. And so I was able to connect to my body, to be able to appreciate this body, this vessel that I'm in, and start to connect to my sexual energy, and in a way that I'd never had before. I never had. And this we talk about different times where there's these instantaneous things. And for me, it was that. It was in an instant. As I laid there one morning after doing my practices, I just laid there and I thought, I realized this is so clean. It's so pure. It's not dirty and shameful like I've been taught. And in that instant, literally, it was that just a total 180 change in how I viewed my body, my sexuality. And I could talk and see things so clearly, and with such a beautiful appreciation for the sexual aspect of who we are. And so it became a natural thing then for me to take my love of teaching and to take it from having taught in the school system to teaching energy work to now teaching in the sexual erotic realm of things. So I went on to create my own practice as a sexological body worker, of hands-on, bringing my energy work and all that I bring to my work. And from there, being that practice, I was the founder. I was, at the time I was associated with, I was a founder of Sexualogical Bodywork Canada. And I've since continued on my own journey. And in that, it was about really supporting people of how to have this embodied experience and connect in beyond our stories of who we've thought that we are. The journey continued, because as I continued with the sexological bodywork training and teaching that, interestingly, at one of my trainings when I was down in San Francisco, we did a workshop on our colleagues could teach one another in the training, and somebody taught a spanking workshop, and I kind of like, whoa, because for me, spanking was an aspect of corporal punishment, right? That's one of the ways that we were disciplined in my home. And so the spanking thing was kind of like, whoa. but we did it. And it was just that connection that happened, and, to be able to really be in tune with one another. It was just this amazing thing. And again, another level of awakening started to happen. And I asked one of my friends and the colleagues in the class, I said, would you take me? So I went and got my black leather things. I got my high boots. And all of a sudden, this whole aspect of this dominatrix persona came forward. And it was just this amazing journey. And so for several years, I worked as a pro dom. Different people came to me through my somatic sex education. The men in particular, actually, when they arrived to me, no matter, was most commonly with erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation, when we talked about things and tapped into what they were really asking for, it was tapping into that aspect of they just wanted to be in that place of surrender and submission. And so there was this piece there. So I supported them in that way. And then about 3 years ago, I had this amazing awakening. And that's where I really connected this aspect of this duality that, and recently I've been talking about implosion, that from the Big Bang on, there's this idea of here's source and everything goes out. And our whole journey since then has been about looking outside of ourselves, for authority, permission, pleasure, partner, all of these different things. I'm looking for that elusive career and the money and all that. And so this piece, and God, this outward journey, we're trying to connect to what seems to be outside of us. And I have now been working with the aspect of implosion, about really coming back, and it's a journey to come back home into the truth of who we are, that which we see out and about us is really a reflection of what may seem to be a duality or a dichotomy or separation, but to be able to bring it all back home into us. And the way that happened was, there was a man he was relating to me. He was a submissive of mine. And he was relating to me his years of being in a sisterhood of several women and men. They were all in their own partnerships. And the men, their greatest desire was to be in submission to. And there was that breaking of the will sometimes, that training, that reinforcement of what the woman wanted. And he said there was something just so, that freedom that came with being in surrender to, and didn't have to be in this place of mind, what do I do? It's just kind of being in surrender to. And in that moment, as he was sharing that, it was kind of like, that's exactly the spiritual journey. When we have these dark nights of the soul, it often is this place of bringing us to this realization that we are not this human that we thought we were. That it becomes this place of recognizing, I thought I was human, and starting to take off some of those old ideas of stories and that we thought that we were, and surrendering into the divine aspect of who we are. And so for me, it's like this whole aspect of the domination and submission, or what I'm calling now the divine feminine leadership and surrender, is very much parallel and mirroring, reflecting our human journey, our spiritual human journey. So for me, it's really this whole, and it came to me that the spiritual and the sexual, my journeys, I thought they were okay. I'll teach the sexuality piece and I'll live my spirituality, but it's kind of like, no, life says no, there's another way. And that's where it brought it in together. That's the pieces, using the sexuality as the portal, and it might be for people to have, whatever sexual freedom looks like for them, or more accurately, perhaps feels like to them, and how it's expressed. And then to be able to tap into, and the people who come to me are usually those ones that are really in a spiritual quest, even though they don't realize it. And that's what I've, the sexual journey is a spiritual journey. And so that's where it's each aspect, or each stream has been coming together of my sexual and the spiritual, and how it's now joined together in this, my body of work, and the way that I live, the way that I teach, and what I bring forward in supporting people.
Wow. Like, there's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. But I just love your journey. Yeah. I mean, I think everything happens in perfect timing, but I guess it would be also very unexpected for you to go from, being, raised in a very conservative home, teaching, to then going, hey, I, teach sexuality and I combine that with, divinity and spirituality. Yeah. And, I have to say this because I think when people think about sex and sexuality, what's portrayed on television and media, it's like you would, most of the time when you think of like dominatrix and all that, you would envision someone that's very like maybe portrayed as more like, wearing provocative clothing or, those type of things. And here you are, this beautiful, gorgeous, like gentle soul that you are. It's like, and I think, do people kind of come to you and go, like, they have to do a double take because like what they were envisioning coming into is like completely different to what they were expecting?
That's often the way it is, for sure. and and as I really listen in and tune into them, and as we have conversation, as we go through various things, it's fascinating how their perceptions or their ideas, even of what they were wanting, those get dropped and left on the floor, as well as they realize, wow, here it was, just this deep place of surrender and yeah, and as well, what I find as well, 𝐻𝐸, is that so many in our culture, as a rule, and not always, but women have been taught that, you're emotional, don't be sexual, because there's, if you are, you're a slut. Men are taught to be sexual or acknowledge, yes, you're sexual, you're a stud, but don't be emotional. So on many levels, we have been all of us have been taught, it's not, don't feel this, don't feel that, it's not safe to feel. If you feel that, it means you're so it's that whole idea of really coming into the feeling. And a lot of my work is truly about letting people feel, supporting people to feel emotion, to feel physicality that they have not always been able to feel, or have not felt it was safe to, or not allowed to. So it's this piece about just really letting people feel beyond words, feel beyond the stories. And you said so early, so beautifully, just moments ago, that aspect of everything shows up in perfect time and way. And when I use the story analogy, and I like to, one of the terms I like to apply for myself is that of a story unweaver. And looking at, when we look at any well-written novel or well-done movie, we look at the threads and how they're done. Here's this character that's there, and the various situations, get to know a little bit about them. And then here's the problem, right? Starts to set in, and the different scenarios and the different characters that come in and reinforce these various things over and over and over and over. And to the point where when we think about us in our own story, right, we come in as babies, no sense of anything. We have to be taught. Here's a cup, here's a giraffe, here's mom, here's dad, here's, this type of a thing. And words. And that's what forms our identity. And so this aspect of, through our sexuality, through our divinity, through our surrender into our recognition of who we are, through the sexual portal, it becomes this taking off those things. And so it's not even about just getting naked in a physical sense, but getting naked beyond our stories of who we are, and a great appreciation for every person, everything that has showed up so intricately and by design along the way, that we think, okay, it's not a big deal, but that's the role they played back there. And yeah.
I just love what you do. And, having talked to so many different people on my podcast, it's what I find is people, like, for yourself, you teach sexuality, but bringing people back to themselves, really. And there's all these different women doing their thing, completely different fields. Some might be teaching wealth, some might be teaching self-love, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it's finding that right instrument, right method for you to come back to yourself. And I think using sexuality is so powerful because, like you were saying, we've been like the programming, like, just me saying that to you that, this is what someone would expect you to look like, but it's not, right? Because you can feel sexy, fully dressed in all the layers of clothing. You don't need to be, but then going into working with you, like stripping those layers again, like what you're doing in the mirror work, that's so powerful, and I've just recently kind of starting to connect with my sexuality. And I went to do this like 6-week program where it's like feminine embodiment through erotic dance. And I can tell you, like 6 weeks ago, I finished my last class last night, but 6 weeks ago, if you told me to do erotic dance, I'd be like, I'd rather jump off a cliff than do that in front of other people, because it was like a sisterhood of women, and we would learn the dance and then we would watch each other, right? And one of the lessons I had to do, like, kind of like what you would do, like a striptease kind of like dance to my girlfriend who I went with. And it was so uncomfortable, right? But it also felt really liberating to kind of just, let that seductress take over, because there's so many parts of us that we suppress because, like you say, we've been taught to be the nice girl, to be the good girl, and not show that part of us. So I think what you do is just amazing. I want to ask you a bit about, I think, what it looks like to come to you, like to work, because I'm so interested, like, in that process. Like, what type of people would come, like, kind of come to you, and then like the process of what you would take, that journey you would take them through, because I find that really fascinating, like how you help them to use that sexuality piece to, then connect with themselves and really start feeling and owning their sexuality. Yeah.
Thank you for the questions. And yes, you're so accurate in terms of about coming back to themselves. And that's where I start with, is looking at, first of all, foundation is consent, not only between myself and the person, just in terms of what are these sessions going to be about, what are we here, but for me, it's the foundation is consent, because that's what from one of our earliest ages is what gets eroded. Simply by, grandma's visiting, and, go say bye to grandma. I don't want to. Go say bye to grandma. If you don't, she'll be sad. Oh, look, she feels lonely. Or, if you don't say goodbye to grandma, she might die by time. So right from a very early on age, we are taught to not honor our own voice, our own desires or choices in the moment. And we are made to feel responsible for someone else's pleasure, happiness, well-being. And that just gets reinforced over and over and over. And so through a variety of practices that I do, both in our session time as well as practice for integration in between session times, is looking at what does it feel like? So I take them through, what does it feel like when you are in alignment, when something is true within you? And so that it becomes this embodied, not a headpiece about, consent, I'll say this or not, or I'll say yes or no, this type. It's what does it feel like, so that they have that as that anchor to come back into. You can always come back. Okay, does this feel true for me in this moment? Maybe later on it'll be different. In this moment. So we start with consent as a so that as they go on, that gets integrated and practiced in our sessions, as well as going into their day-to-day applications, family life, relationships, work, all of those things. And then from there, there's a combination of one-on-one sessions as well as working in group. There's so much power of working in, as you mentioned from your dance experience, right, 𝐻𝐸, is that aspect of the power of the community, of being seen, of being supported. And I think that's a big part of it. When you know it's a safe place, no matter how awkward it is, there's this kind of this, yes, I am here in this safe place that I can start to be seen and let some of those old things start to wash away and fall away. And so working in community where people have opportunity to share and talk about, maybe it's about recognizing, yeah, you like that too? Oh, wow, I thought I was the only one. And so I take them through various processes of finding out how natural our sexuality is. We come from sex. So why would it be so bad, right? Why would it be sex creates life, and we do everything we can to preserve and to maintain life. So why would we judge and demonize that which we come from? And so it's to bring them back into this naturalness of the wholeness of sexuality to begin with. And then for them in their own expressions along the way, just like a child, there's different levels for sex education, which we don't always get, right? Hardly ever do. And so to be able to know that things are age appropriate and to be able to explore this and that. And I use food as an example for that, to be able to see the naturalness and the wholeness of our sexuality. And from there, just really starting to dive in. So it's a combination of in person, but the transformation, as you mentioned, is to really bring them back home to themselves, both in this human experience, and then let's keep on going back into that deeper aspect of who they are as divine spiritual beings. That allows things to come through. There's a quote from Audre Lorde that has for I don't know, the last 10 plus years been foundational and a cornerstone for me. She says, "We tend to speak of the erotic as a quick, tantalizing sexual arousal. I speak of the erotic as that deepest life force, that force that moves us in a fundamental way."
Oof. Full body tingles going on here.
I'm getting them
Wow.
too.
Yeah.
And I suspect that, 𝐻𝐸, that's us, the container that you were in for your dance as well, was tapping into that life force energy that we are, that is expressed through our sexual nature. And the erotic isn't just about, when we think about sexuality or the erotic, it's not about just sex. And sex isn't just about a partner. It's about how can we be at one with ourselves, and how does that sexual erotic energy express in each one of us at any given time. Sometimes it might be in a sexual act with ourselves or with somebody else or someone else. It could be, as one of my young clients, a young woman of early 20s, she said that, wow, I thought it was about my sexuality. It's not. It's the erotic is just going on. And my writing is becoming prolific. I'm getting awards for my writing. And another one, as an entrepreneur, it's allowing her to get more clear on what's next for her business. And one of my, I just received an email this morning from one of my early clients who was in her 70s at the time. So now in her 80s, and she's just keeps sharing with me how she's got this new chapter with this love of her life, and how our work has just been so central to her. And so it's never too late. There's never any limit on what is true for you. And that's the key, is coming back home to ourselves. And who am I? What does sexual freedom look like, feel like? And how is it expressed for each one of us in any given moment?
That's so beautiful. I just need to process everything that you said, because it's just hitting like, yeah. And when you said that we came from sex, why do we like make it something bad? It's like, oh yes, like that makes so much sense, what you just said. Yeah. But we make it such a dirty thing, I think, because I think what's being portrayed in media makes it dirty. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I learned when I was doing my, dance program, because it wasn't just about dancing, it was like, she talked about the different archetypes and the theory behind it. But I think like we've been brought up kind of like, when we express our sexuality is for other people to look at. But so then that's why it's like, oh, you're again seeking that external validation, like you were saying, is that explosion. But then doing this work is the implosion, where you're like, I'm actually expressing my sexuality for myself. And that is so much more powerful. Yeah.
Very, very true. And that aspect of from there, and the wisdom of my former husband of, find out what makes you feel good so you can tell me. And so it just allows us, how can I expect someone else to know more about me than I do? So being able to really come back home and, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And I think that really speaks also not even beyond our sexuality, right? Of if we're looking for, as you mentioned, that external validation, it becomes quite a treadmill, quite a hamster wheel. And as opposed to just coming back into who am I? What is my truth? And how do I then express from that place? And to being able to voice and ask for help or clarify, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and knowing that changes. It's not a static thing. And I think we've been so ingrained in right and wrong, good and bad, that we think, okay, well, if I don't know, that's wrong. Or if it changes, that's bad. It's kind of like, no, that's the dynamic of life, is change. And so being in tune with at every moment, what we like, what we don't like, or what we need, what we don't need, and be able to voice that beyond shame, beyond, just going to sit here for a moment, see what's coming. I think it's beyond the separation. That illusion of separation comes in that when we've been taught that we are separate from someone else, and even the whole birthing thing, right? That we come into, and right from birth, we are separated from that which gave us life or that nurtured us. That this whole idea of separation seems to be so key. And so we're left adrift in some ways of, well, who am I? And I have to find myself in relation to somebody else. And if we can perhaps, and this is where I come back to the mirror work, is in mirror work in many ways, is if we can look at that which is outside of us, not as other than, but a reflection of us, then it allows us to come back into ourselves, come home to ourselves, both in our human experience and in our sexual and our spiritual relationship and experience as well.
I love that. This question has kept popping up and nudging me, so I'm going to ask it. So at the beginning, when you were talking about your journey and growing up and, saving yourself for marriage, how that is like a program of, our sexuality doesn't belong to us. So the question that came through was, well, isn't sex sacred, right? So do we want to give it away to lots of different people? And so I think the question was like, what's your view on that? Maybe in terms of also from a spirituality point of view as well. Yeah. So that's just kind of what came through.
Okay. All right. Great. I would say that from my perspective, my experience of seeing life, all of it as divine, as spiritual, as sacred, no matter what happens, everything is sacred. And so that just becomes that. And I like to look at that of the library, right? When we look at the library, there's all kinds of genres of stories, right? Of various things and age, from the picture books up to the, the books that are, 5 inches thick. and all kinds of topics. And so it's that same way. There's all kinds of experiences that we have in life, and all of it is sacred simply because it is. And life source, God, the divine, however we term things, however, whatever label we try to put to that which is unlabelable, unnameable, it's all there. And I think that's a big part of us, really part of our expansion or our awareness, our awakenings, is it's all there. Instead of something becoming it was a curse, and how do we see it as a blessing? It's kind of like, how can I see it as a blessing the whole way through? How can I, even in the midst of it, this is for me, right? It's becoming more aware that life isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. And just, that movie, the story, everything is here, divinely orchestrated and designed to be here for us in this unfolding journey. From a human experience perspective, the sexuality, that if we look at when we've been taught that we're not there, it's that piece about boundaries. Like, if my body isn't mine, what right do I have to say if somebody wants to touch me or to do something, or when I don't want it? And so there's a whole piece of that, of, that reclaiming back that energy that was taken from us, if you will. And then there's also this piece. I remember my husband, that I've been with my husband of almost 10 years now. We received a phone call from a young woman about 8 years ago, and she said she was seeking my guidance. She knew of me from a family member. She called us up and she said, and she was, I think, 12 or 13 at the time, and she said, "Can you help me to know, right around at school right now, it's the thing where the girls are giving the guys the blowjobs, and and it's this whole thing." And so as we talked with her, we helped her to realize that it's that piece about what girls often feel that they need to do to be accepted, to be loved, to give of themselves, to give of their bodies. It's not there. So if I want to be loved, I guess I got to give. And so to be able to recognize, in talking with so many people, often those pieces where there's sex all over the place, if somebody wants to and they want to have sex with multiple people different times, that's, if they're doing that from that, this feels alive, I want to do this, awesome, wow, she wants to go and have sex, he wants to go and have sex, they want to go on a roller coaster, they want to go fishing, wow, all kinds of experiences we get to have, right? And if that's what they're choosing from a whole body, yes, then go for it. That who's to judge, who's to say? There might be some people that say, oh, that doesn't fit. That's their situation, right? And we never know somebody else's inner world and inner authority to be able to say what is right or wrong. All we can recognize is, that sort of, I'm challenged by that or whatever. But that's often where judgment comes, right? Projection, when we're not comfortable with our own things, or when we,
No, I love that. No, I think your perspective of it was really, I don't even know what the word is, but it makes so much sense in that, from the sexuality, and there's, you did such a great job, giving that answer to that question, because it was probably a more prickly question, but it is that if you have done the work and you are coming from a place of consent, like what you said, consent and wholeness, and it is your true expression, then whatever you want to do, you just go and do it. But if it is coming from a place of, I need to feel loved, I need to seek that external validation, then there's that piece where we have to look at, to go, okay, what is it that you actually desire from you, and not what others desire from you. And no, that was a really great answer.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And thank you for asking the question, because I think that, it seems like when questions or different things keep circling around, there's, to honor that. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. I want to ask you, like you doing the work that you do, obviously
Mhm.
your husband knows what you do, but like how does he like is he just like, oh yeah, you know, or how does he navigate that, or yeah, does he have
Mm.
any
Hmm. Yeah, great question again. And I am so, uh, him being in my life is very much a reflection of my own journey, my own healing, my own coming into my wholeness. He absolutely knows about my work. He supports me in it. He does everything that he can to support me in my wellness and getting my business going and whatever I can. So if it means if we're doing in-person sessions, he helps me get the session rooms ready and various things. He also one of the works that we have done together is he sometimes when we worked with clients when we were in person doing in-person sessions, we would do the sessions together sometimes. He also does erotic. He's a photographer. One of his many hats that he wears, he's a professional photographer. And so we've done erotic photo shoots for women who come in and just are really, you know, doing that. And just to watch them in being in this sacred space of being seen as they are as women and the essence of who they are. It's amazing how they just open up and just allow themselves to be seen. And then when they see the photos, it's kind of like, wow, I had no idea. And so he's, yeah, as much as possible, he's involved in my work. And whether it's behind the scenes or, involved with various things, when it comes time for my domination work of doing that, my feminine leadership work, he's always there. He has been from as early as he can remember that of supporting the women, doing what he can to support women, empowering women, um, uplifting the matriarchy, and so he's just so thrilled. So it's no accident that we came together, that I'm in this place of doing this work. And yeah.
That's so beautiful. I love it that he's so supportive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, he is.
this question just popped in that
Mm-hmm.
because you do the dominant matrix work. Do you ever like be on the flip, like be the submissive for like clients that I don't know? No. Mm.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. And I don't. I actually at one point, um, I I did. I said I want to know what it feels like. And when it came time for the various things, I realized, wait a minute, I don't want this. I have been submissive to the patriarchy. That's my term.
Mm.
I've been submissive to the patriarchy for 50 years.
Mm.
I'm done with that. So for me, it was the turning of the tables. While it was good for me to experience the physicality of things, to know what I'm doing with people when I'm in those types of sessions, because I've got the vanilla. I've got people that I work with that are around the globe that I've never met in person. And it's
Mm.
just we do the energy work, we do the feeling work. It's just those kinds of things, and so I've got these different compartments, if you will, that are connected, um, but for me, it was important to recognize, wow, energetically, I had been submissive. So for me, it was that aspect of really reclaiming my power, reclaiming my sexuality, reclaiming my leadership. And
Mm.
people, when I talk about female leadership, well, is that in the corporate world, what could show up that way? For me, it's really tied into, again, this mirror aspect. If we look at the way that we have experienced it for how many decades and millennia, that of the masculine energy, that the what we've called the patriarchy. And I say that's what it looks like when that masculine energy is not channeled, when it
Mm.
goes or runs amok.
Mm.
And again, paralleling that, that's what it looks like in our human experience when we believe that we are human.
Mm.
So bringing it around now back as things is this uprising of women's empowerment and the divine feminine leadership or arising. What we're doing is not only awakening to the awakened feminine in our human experience of really empowering women, letting their voices be heard, letting their power, all of those things be heard and seen. But what we're doing as well is bringing that feminine leadership back into place, which is that natural, I'm going to say, is the natural flow of things. And how do we know? Because it's reflected in spirit. Spirit is what initiates this human experience. Form is in support of that. So we have experienced the opposite of what it's like when that feminine energy is not recognized in its role of initiator or as source, and its leadership, its guidance.
Yeah.
So as we in our world arise the feminine, what we're doing is a writing into that place where women are saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't like, and it's not in separation from. And I think this is a big part of what's happening is we have come from a place of dichotomy or duality of males or females, and then we realize, oh, the patriarchy doesn't work, and we've been victims. We've all been victims, if we want to use that word, because what the men have been doing is kind of like, I have all this energy, I don't know what to do with it, and so I'm going to do it. And it often becomes destructive or obstructive, and nobody wins. It's kind of like, what do I do with this? But when the feminine energy comes into place and starts to create this momentum, that's why I refer to it as the leadership, that momentum, then it's this natural thing for the masculine. When the women can say, this is what we want, this is what we need, we collaborate and we bring this energy in, then it's by nature, the masculine form is there in support of it. And so it's, like I say, it's a place for everything and everything in its place, but even more, a place for everyone and everyone in their place. And it's in this natural, harmonious place where when the feminine leads, whether in our relationships, whether it's within us, when we're recognizing that flow, that leadership, that here, what can I do to support? And then it's this harmonious thing. And not only the females and the males, but also the children get to be in this harmonious thing of this relationship, this world, if you will, within and without, that is in a place of harmony from that place of divine feminine leadership. And so I have this incredible privilege of supporting women and coming into this place of reclaiming their power, their sexuality, and then helping them to know that as they step into their leadership, that the masculine is there saying, how can I serve? How can I please? How can I protect?
Yes.
How can I be in service to you? And in my work, one of my realms that I do is I'm a bondage trainer and practitioner, and bondage is this exquisite body of work that created by 𝐋𝐨𝐫𝐧𝐚 that is erotic massage and bondage DS. And in my world, it's primarily men that come for the sessions, and I'm training women to be bondage practitioners. And when I teach these women, when I help them to know the role that they are playing as they step into their divine feminine, it's not about coming to give these guys the thrill. It's not about, giving these guys a happy ending. It's kind of like, no, these are males who recognize in their soul of soul, in their heart of service, I want to serve. And so as I train these women to own their power, their sexuality, their feminine leadership, they then in their sessions with people, with men, allow these men to sink into that place of surrender and submission as well. And again, there's the harmony that starts to happen.
I think that's a whole nother podcast session that we need to get to.
Love that.
Yeah. But wow, that was so beautiful. Like, yeah, you're just amazing. I love you so much. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, I met you maybe a month or two ago, but I just knew. You're just this amazing soul. And everything. And I love, this last bit about the masculine supporting the feminine. And again, it's also not just about women, it's about our men as well, because that patriarchy, that destructive masculine energy affects them as well. And that's where the men aren't, haven't been feeling their emotions and all that. So it is kind of helping them. Yeah. So I'm just looking at the time and I'm like, I don't want this conversation to end. But Lorna, can you share with us what you'll love our audience to take away with them after listening to our conversation?
I would say 3 things. The first one is this journey of coming home to yourself. In a human experience and then in a divine experience. This aspect of knowing that this whole thing of the divine feminine leadership, how it plays out and how the divine masculine is there in support. And again, how that can show up. And then the third piece is that they are not alone, not only in their experience, but in coming into this, that they are there. Like, that's one of the things I love, is being able to support people into their own awakening, their own sexual awakening, their own spiritual awakenings, to be able to come here, so that to know that they're not alone, and that there is no shame. Shame is an illusion. There is no shame in their journey that they've experienced, and there's no shame in stepping into this new expression of who they are, and this new expression and experience of who they are, and the joy that's there.
Thank you, Lorna. You have to come back, like I said, to talk about the bond massage, please, because that's another layer that I love to talk about. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and it's like I said in the podcast, like so many of the things that you said have really hit my soul. So I'm getting a bit emotional. So thank you. If people want to find out more about you or how they can work with you, where's the best place to find you?
I've got my emails, and I'll put some links in the in our printout here for the podcast. Lorna at @lornagale.com is the email to contact me at. And that's the first way. I'm just my website. I'm just getting a new website on the go here, so that will be coming, to get a little bit more of a sense of my work and some testimonials. There's Trusted Body Work, and my profile there, Lorna Gale, can be done there. And so we'll leave it with those pieces. And I'll also put into our write-up, I'll put a calendar link if there's people that are saying this is really touching onto their soul and really calling them, because that's what it is. It's not, when we look at Audre Lorde's quote, it's not just this sexual, I'm on the thrill, but if they're feeling that call, kind of like, okay, I'm feeling called to this, there's something here, to really trust that. And that's a part of coming back home to ourselves, is to really trust that's there. And I look forward to speaking with people to be able to support them into that awareness of what is their next, their best next step. Them. And if any role that I can play in theirs, truly an honor to be able to live my calling in helping them to live into the depths of their soul and who they are being called to be as well. And it's not about becoming anyone or anything. It's about that recognition and that experience of who you are right here, right now.
Thank you so much. And I just feel like my whole sacral has just like opened. I just feel so much energy there at the moment. So it's very interesting how conversations doing something.
Beautiful.
So thank you so much, Lorna.
Beautiful.
And like I said, I'd love to have you back. And thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Kaki. It's been beautiful to be here with you, and such beautiful questions, and the space that you open for the questions to be here and the answers, and all in support of the people who are listening and how that ripples out. So thank you.